officers, EMS, family members, and survivors. So the staff in this museum, we were here that day on September 11, 2001, and your arm's gonna get real tired because it's about 15-minute talk.
That's okay.
Okay. So we were here that day, so we give that personal connection. We're not reading from a script. We actually tell you what happened here that day. One of the simple things is, you see on TV, 2 buildings came down. That's pretty far from the truth. 2 buildings didn't come down. It was 7 buildings that came down that fateful morning. So it's things like that that we can tell you that you don't read in the history books. And for those of you who are in school, you learn about 9/11, but you're only given 1 paragraph. You can't really learn a whole lot from 1 paragraph. Okay, so that's why we like to tell you our personal testimony. I'm one of the surviving 350 docents in this museum, and I say surviving because many of us are dying off pretty quickly. And we hope that when we give you our testimony, that you'll be able to tell your great-great-grandchildren what happened here. Because once we're gone, there is going to be no more recorded history of what actually happened here 19 and a half years ago. So what you folks are about to hear today is something really, really unique, okay? That we really hope that you will carry to heart. You know, I'm supposed to give out these things, but I guess you'll get these downstairs if you wanna, if you're into social media, because I see you folks have all these cameras out, okay? You're supposed to write something, whether good or bad, you're supposed to write something. Anyway, if you can tell by my facial features, I'm Chinese American. I was born and raised here in Chinatown, New York City. If you can think, behind this building over here is Chinatown. And to show you how close Chinatown is, okay, see how close it is? It's really close to the World Trade Center, okay? Now,
Can I see it one more time? Sorry.
Sure. So wherever you have Chinese people in the world,
Wow.
regardless of where you are in the world, it's just real crowded. Chinatown, New York City is like where they could put 1 million kids on 1 square block and say, go out and play. So it's kind of crowded, okay? But this entire area here is the financial district. And what makes this unique is that the financial district at 4 o'clock, when that stock exchange bell rings, and on Saturdays and Sundays, the place is a ghost town. It's wonderful. There are no cars driving through. There's not even cars parked there. There's no pedestrians. I can go down there and for the entire day not see 1 person walking the street. It's fantastic. This is where I learned to ride a skateboard, learned to ride a bike. By the age of 10, I owned Wall Street. It was fantastic. Okay. My real job is I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I do surgery, and not anymore. But back in 2001, one of my offices was on 35th Street and Park Avenue, which is about 3.5 miles in that direction. Back then, I loved doing research. I was doing a paper of Eastern versus Western medicine. Now, I can go to any hospital in the United States and interview the patients. I get the Western perspective. But to make the paper legitimate, you have to get the Eastern perspective also. Well, on the other side of this building here is Beekman Hospital, okay? Beekman Hospital, being so close to Chinatown, has a huge Chinese population. So I was on my way down to Beekman Hospital to interview 4 of their patients. I had permission with their social service department to interview these patients. I don't work at Beekman. I don't have privileges there. They don't know who I am, but I just had a meeting with just those 4 people. So I was on my way there. As I'm heading to Beekman Hospital, I look up and I see the World Trade Center ablaze. I see the towers ablaze. Okay. I didn't see the planes hit, but I definitely saw them ablaze. So instead of heading to my meeting at Beekman, I decided to go to the World Trade Center. My background is I'm a former combat medic in the US Army. And many years later, after I graduated from medicine, I went into the Air Force as a medical officer. But you don't need a military background to realize when you have 2 planes hitting 2 separate buildings at the same time, you realize our country is under attack. I have to emphasize I'm not a hero, and emphasize that very, very strongly, okay? A hero is a firefighter, a police officer, and EMT. They came to work that morning knowing fully well that there was a chance they weren't going home that night. I came to the World Trade Center because when I saw these buildings on fire, these are my people who are hurt. These are my people who are dying. I wanted to see if there's something I can do to help. That's why I came to the World Trade Center. And if you folks saw the 3rd video, which is over there, you'll actually see me standing there when the tower came down and being engulfed by all that smoke. As I got to the base of Tower 2 came exploding down. This photo was snapped at the exact moment. This is Tower 2, this is Tower 1. This is the exact moment that Tower 2 was coming down. I say the term, they were exploding as they were coming down because the World Trade Center is 110 stories off the ground. Tower 2 came down between 10 to 12 seconds. For those of you with an engineering background, you realize when you have this much building coming down at that great speed, it generates a huge amount of pressure. So the building appeared to be exploding as it's coming down. Now, you people know what a grenade is? We don't use it anymore, but old time we used to use grenades. Grenades explode and sends metal in all different directions. Picture Tower 2 as one huge grenade. People as far as 4 blocks away, which is right about here, were being hurt and killed, not from the tower coming down, but from the explosion shooting out sideways. When it's all said and done, hard to believe, but somewhere in there is me, okay? To this day, I can still see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, as if it just happened yesterday. By the grace of God, because this was my playground growing up, and when you have 7 buildings on the ground exploded and all destroyed and everything's burning, when the dust settled a little bit, I was still able to make out some streets and landmarks, okay? That was critical. In finding these familiar landmarks, it guided me to Beekman Hospital. Now, I didn't go to Beekman Hospital because I needed help. I went to Beekman Hospital because as an orthopedist, I have no other skills. I can't help anyone. But if I can get into their operating room, I can help in surgery there with their staff. When I got there, by the time I got there, the operating room was already going full blast. And there were victims that had come in earlier, and their surgeons were already in the operating room. They had prepped the patient, they were doing their surgery already. I identified who I was. Okay, obviously we don't carry our medical license on us or certification, but they trusted me on my word on what I do for a living. So they gave me the 4th floor conference room. Now the 4th floor conference room, as you look around my gallery over here, it's a little smaller than this room here, okay? And if you can picture here in the center, a huge conference room table. There's one door over there, and there's one door over here. And it's eerily very, very quiet. Reason for that is because there's only 2 people in the room. Myself and 1 patient. I didn't even have a nurse, didn't have a technician, it was just me and 1 patient. Now, you see New York itself. It's a modern metropolis. Modern cities have modern medical centers. It was so surreal on September 11, 2001, because on that heart conference room table, with no sheet or mattress, I started to sew people back together again. It's very surreal. I had 1 suture kit, which consisted of a pair of scissors, needle holder, and a forceps. I would place it in a basin, pour isopropyl alcohol in it, slush it around, pour that out, repeat it over and over until it came out clear. Then I would bring in the next patient and start to sew the next patient up. By noon, they weren't sending any more patients to me. I just assumed that because of our proximity to ground zero, that we were saturated, that they were diverting ambulances to the outer boroughs. It didn't dawn upon me. They weren't sending patients to me was because there was just no more survivors coming in. That afternoon, I was thirsty. Of course, the hospital has no food or water, okay? The cafeteria has been converted into a trauma bay. I couldn't come out here because there's nothing except burning buildings and debris and troops on the ground with automatic weapons to shoot to kill. And no one knew who the enemy was at that time. My best bet was to try to get to Chinatown. Now, prior to 2001, I had moved out to New Jersey, but I kept coming down to Chinatown every single Sunday to go to church because this is where I was born and raised. And I still kept going to church down there. I knew if I could get to that church, I can get some water. See this over here? That's not just a TV antenna, but this is a cell phone antenna. This was the only game in town. We didn't have those artificial looking trees. When Tower 1 was struck, regardless of who your carrier was, you just lost cell service, okay? The church I attend down here is a very, very old church. They have something that, well, you're gonna have to Google the pictures, but it's called landlines. We used to be able to plug a wire into the wall. We used to be able to talk on a telephone through a landline. Well, my father, who resides in New Jersey, he couldn't get a hold of me on the cell phone, obviously, for the entire day, but he has a landline. He knew of all the places in all of New York, all 5 boroughs, there's only one place I would seek refuge on a day like today, would be at the church. And because he had a landline, he was able to call through. And around 8:20 that evening, he was able to inform me that Susan was in the World Trade Center. Susan's my sister. She didn't work in the World Trade Center. She was there for a 2-day meeting, of which the second day never came. See these vertical lines right here? That's these vertical lines right here. This is Windows on the World restaurant. They occupy the 106th and 107th floor of Tower 1. Susan worked for a company that doesn't exist anymore. It's called Compact Computer. I think they went out of business maybe about 10 years ago. It used to be a very large computer company. There was a huge computer meeting up there. Many computer companies were up here that fateful morning for that power breakfast. Compact sent in a 5-man delegation, of which Susan was one of the people on that delegation. One of the guys on Susan's team came to the power breakfast with a green shirt and a tie that just didn't match. It's very hard to match a green shirt with any tie. But you cannot come to a power breakfast with a green shirt. So he came down here to the Marriott to get a new shirt and a new tie before he can rejoin the group up here. When his elevator was at the bottom, that's when the tower was struck. He couldn't go back up, but what he was able to do was contact Houston, Texas, which is the corporate headquarters for Compact. They in turn notified looked up the next of kin, which was Dad, and Dad in turn got a hold of me that evening. We were considered fortunate because we found out what happened to our loved one that same day. Most of our loved ones who perished on that one day, we didn't know what happened to them until about 2 weeks later, so we were considered fortunate. So many people have asked me, what's it like to be at ground zero? Well, on the third video, you got to see where I'm standing, but it doesn't really give the whole picture. What I'd like you to do is I want you to do this exercise with me. I want you to think about where you grew up as a child. Think about your main street of your town where you grew up, where you know every single store on the whole entire street. You know the decorations. Picture a beautiful day just like this. Not a cloud in the sky. People are just hustling, bustling, going to work. Now I want you to picture what we call an arc light strike. An arc light strike is a squadron of B-52 bombers. Not one bomber, an entire squadron. That's multiple bombers. Each bomber requires 8 jet engines to keep it up, so these are really large bombers. These bombers fly so high up, you can't hear them. But as they fly over your main street where you grew up, they drop all their ordnances on a surgical strike down your main street. As the last bomb explodes, you then take a step into your main street. That's what it was like on September 11, 2001. This was my main street. This was my playground. This is all that I knew as a child. And within minutes, the whole entire landscape was altered forever. There's a room to my right, and I'm assuming you folks haven't gone into the room to my right yet. But the room, if you were to stand in the center of the room, it's a very sobering sight. You're surrounded by hundreds of pictures. And I emphasize there are hundreds of pictures. There's only one picture, one victim. There's no duplicate picture in this room. But on September 11, 2001, we lost 2,749 people in one day. So when you're standing in that room there, you realize that's only a tiny percentage of the amount of people that we had actually lost on that one day. Since September 11th, we've lost over 3,000 more people who have finally died from their cancers, from their head traumas, amputations, wound injuries. We presently still lose 4 people per week from the events that occurred 19 and a half years ago. And in the months and years ahead, are we going to lose more? Yes, we are guaranteed to lose more in the months and years ahead. I say that with great confidence because I'm one of the statistics. That's why I don't do surgery anymore. I've got 3 cancers growing in me, went through 5 surgeries, and the last word is they can't get my cancer. Okay, so my shelf life is very, very short, if you know what I mean. But I'm okay because I know where I'm going after this life. I'm okay with it. But my greatest joy and determination to do is to tell as many people as possible, because my history is going to be gone, and you folks are going to be the only ones who are going to be able to tell your future generations what happened here that day. I gave you a lot of numbers, but these are not numbers in this world. These are our mothers, our fathers, our brothers and sisters, our best friends, our children are in that room. If you don't know anyone who died in the World Trade Center, on this day, April 3rd, 2021, you're going to be able to go home, wherever you came from, you're going to be able to tell the folks back home, I know one person who died in the World Trade Center, and her name is Susan. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Susan so that she becomes your friend and she's no longer a number, okay? And if you can recite her name once a year, she's never going to be forgotten. Susan, not only was she an executive for Compact Computer, but in my mind, she was the world's greatest Sunday school teacher. She loved teaching Sunday school. She taught for 17 years. She resided with Dad in New Jersey, and the scenario would be very similar. I would pick her up at her home and drive her to Chinatown every single Sunday. As we're on the highway, she would say, Gordon, it's that time, which means the windows are up, air conditioning's on, music is turned off. No one is allowed to talk. In fact, I don't think Sis allowed us to breathe. We had to be real quiet. She was tough. She would open her briefcase and she would go through her notes, her syllabus, her handouts. And after about 5 minutes, you would think that she's preparing for a board meeting or something, some really important meeting. She would shut her briefcase. I would look at her and I go, Sis, the kids you're teaching are only 8 years old. But that didn't matter to Sis, that she was teaching little kids. She just had that enthusiasm. She just loved teaching Sunday school. That enthusiasm for teaching Sunday school, she also had for her work. That propelled her to be an executive for a major corporation such as Compact Computers. As you pretty much figured out who I am, I'm what we call a triple. I'm the only recorded triple in the history of New York City. I'm a triple as it relates to September 11th. And the three things that makes me a triple is I'm a survivor, I'm a family member, and I'm a rescue worker, all in one. So my plate's kind of full, if you know what I mean, okay? In the years right after the bombing, many colleges and universities invite me to be the keynote speaker at their commencement exercises. What I notice when I speak at these graduations, each time I speak, I decompress a little bit from that really full plate. In September 2018, the Tribute Museum here, as I mentioned, this museum is different from all the other museums because we have that human factor. The Tribute Museum here got a hold of me. They asked if I would be here once a month to speak. Today's my once a month, so you folks are stuck with me. The other docents, the other 350 docents have equally very, very compelling narratives also. What I notice when I speak here in front of 7 people, or if I speak in front of 10,000 people at a graduation, I decompress the same amount. When you folks came to this museum, you thought that you would benefit from it. In actuality, you're making us benefit because you're helping us decompress. As you go through the museum, you'll see other docents dressed similar to what I'm wearing. And if you go up to them and say, hey, tell me your story. If you allow them to recount their narrative to you, you're helping them decompress from the attacks of 19 and a half years ago. And for that, we're really, really grateful. So as I conclude, are there any questions? No? Okay. All right, let me take you folks out to where you were standing, okay, so that you don't lose out, because I know you came to see the artifacts.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I mentioned earlier. Yeah, I'm Gordon Huie.
Can I have a card? Thank
Not
you.
really, but I have these little things
Thank
that
you.
The museum gives us. Okay, here you go. How old was she? She was 41. Yeah, she was 41. So you folks can come with me. I don't want to shortchange you folks. Now,
Thank you so much.
Lee Ielke, he's one of our founders of this museum. He has 2 sons who are firefighters. His youngest, Jonathan, who's a firefighter. We found Jonathan about 3 months after the bombing, and we found Jonathan's coat about 2 weeks after we found Jonathan. Jonathan's coat is on display, not because he's Lee Ielke's son. As I mentioned, all the artifacts in this museum are very personal to us, and they're donated by us. Jonathan's coat is on display because Jonathan's a really big, burly firefighter, okay? When you look at the front of Jonathan's coat, which is right there, okay? You see it's buttoned pretty nicely. But when you look at the back of Jonathan's coat, it's like tissue paper. we wanted to show the tremendous force it took to rip a burly man out of a coat that's pretty much like kryptonite. So it was a tremendous force that day. And the mound that was created by the 7 buildings that exploded was between 10 to 20 stories tall. So it was a huge mound of debris. It's not an empty pit, it's a huge mountain. Okay, all right, come with me, folks. I think you two were in this area here, and you folks were right over here. Okay, so you two come with me. Okay. There are, actually, I stole you folks from here, from the history gallery, correct?
Yeah, we were walking right through here.
So I don't know where you stopped, so I can